welcome back. The very last RecapTV of this year's Arctic Frontiers 2024 conference, Actions and Reactions, Global Actions and Arctic Reactions. My name is still Andreas Raspotnik, and as I said, last recap of this year, very important recap. We just had 90 minutes of discussion on artificial intelligence in the Arctic and for the Arctic, and I look very much forward to this discussion because I have learned a lot and I hope to learn even more in this discussion. People that have joined me are, to my right, Lauren Decker, who is the Chief Science Officer of PolArctic. Welcome. Then to her right, we have Pouya Dabiran-Zohoory, emerging leader, Arctic Frontiers emerging leader and lawyer at Crosslinx Transit Solution in Toronto. And to his right, we have Salberg, Norwegian Computing Center in Oslo. Thank you guys very much for doing that after the conference is almost over. So most people have left, but we are still here to follow up. Before we actually started, Lauren was asking, how do we sum up these 90 minutes? So we do not attempt to sum it up, but there was a lot of big picture story on what AI is, how AI can help us globally, but also in the Arctic, and of course what the problems potentially are with AI, as big as they are. I want to ask first, Pouya, from an Arctic Frontiers emerging leader perspective, have you discussed AI in the Arctic or AI generally during your days with the Arctic emerging leaders?
Thank you. It hasn't been a focus of our discussions, but as sort of a youthful generation who's grown up with smartphones, we spoke about how we've come to learn and study and apply knowledge and principles with modern software. And a lot of our emerging leaders, they're engineers, they're scientists, they know how to work with data. They're working on very novel projects within the Arctic. And so we spoke about how AI can help make things more efficient. And we're all facing crises, and I think our message as emerging leaders was there's a lot to deal with for our generation, all at the same time, and AI is going to help with that.
Lauren, what do you think about, AI can help the crisis ahead, particularly when we also look at the keynote speak that was given, where it was said there's a lot of data, a lot of research done on monitoring change in the Arctic, but less on adaptation and transformation. Your 2 cents on that very broad topic?
Yeah, I don't have, it's not 2 cents. I'm sorry. It's going to be like 4 hours.
Multiplied.
So
2 cents.
Yeah. I loved the keynote speaker's talk. One of the things that he mentioned was don't go alone, test your models, learn from your failures. That was, I think, one of the key takeaways for me from that talk was people need to be able to make their own models, and doing it with team members like small companies like mine, PolArctic, which are really interested in supporting all of these different groups and being able to have their own sovereignty over their data and their models, being able to come to a table as equals and actually coordinating with people and having their own opinions on what should be done. PolArctic is doing this in a really great way. I actually think that I would love to bring in Arnt on this as well. The IBM guy was talking about how they want to democratize a lot of these things, and Arnt had a previous talk about how he is also working on some structure like that as well. So PolArctic, small company, we want to go out there and build narratives with little groups and start really supporting people. But I think to do this at a really big scale, you also need that democratization of having really big models that big groups make, but then anybody can use.
Direct question to Arnt.
Yeah, I agree, and this is what she is talking about. Is my talk yesterday, where we are creating a foundation model for Earth observation, basically, and of course the model itself is quite big and requires a lot of effort to build. But the idea is to use it to adapt to different use cases that could support, for instance, the Arctic, sea ice, or whatever task you want to solve, and that's the idea with that one. And also, because now I think it will be big tech who will own the construction of the models. Of course, there are some centers or so where you can train models that has been established, that are available for research community, but still this is not the same as Tesla has when they developing their models.
Then coming back to what we heard in the morning, there were a lot of questions. What can we do in the what can we do for the Arctic? In a kind of John F. Kennedy setting, don't ask what the Arctic can do for you, but ask what you can do for the Arctic, and then bringing that back to the AI discussion. What can the models actually do for us? There was one of the key discussion points today was like we need, as any researchers, clear questions, a clear puzzle. We really need to do what we want to figure out. So maybe following up to that, it's like, what can the models do for us in the Arctic?
And this is what Camilla Brekke was addressing as well. Today, you can apply them to Earth observation data. That's the first thing that comes into my mind. So that is the main thing. So you can monitor and you can use it to predict what will happen maybe in the future and all these things. But still, the thing that is important there is the data you collect, and it needs to have this diversity. And by that, she means you need to cover, in order for the models to work, you need to cover what can happen there. So if you are restricting your data to a specific area or to a specific time or whatever, it won't work on other places that good. So then you cannot trust it. So in order to build trust, and trust is the important thing that's come from this, comes from the big picture talks in my, because you need to establish trust. And also in the data set, it cannot be biased or be not diversified enough. But also, I think you need to have other tools attached to it, like you need to assess the uncertainty of your model, so you need a prediction for it. And for some cases, maybe you need to be able to have some explainability of it, so you can really figure out how is it making its decision. So these are things that could be useful. And it's
important point, because I wrote down trust, and I think you're totally right. That was a common theme through all the big picture discussion. And trust, that brings me to you, Pouya, is essentially then not a legal concept per se, but trust, accountability, AI coming with so many unknowns. As a lawyer, how do you think that trust issue should be tackled more from that legal accountability question?
It's a great question. Whenever the law is faced with a very novel situation, it can react in two ways. It can be addressed through the courts whenever it is brought through the courts, and judicial reasoning is slow moving, but it evolves. But the better way, and the increasingly complex way we deal with these phenomena, are regulatory schemes. And we do that through the legislature, and regulations are useful because they are malleable. And so we can change them to adapt as our knowledge changes about what we're dealing with. And more importantly than judicial application and judicial use of AI, regulations can be forward-looking. So we can develop regulations that safeguard use, that safeguard data in a way that you can only sort of enforce after the fact through the courts. And so I think that's what our governments really need to do. And in order to build that trust, they need to do it with full transparency with the public in terms of what they're looking to do and how they want to keep who responsible.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much.
If I can jump in on there too. One of the things they were saying is that the technology is neutral, and then someone said the data has bias, and then someone followed up and said it's actually the sampler that has the bias. The data is just the data.
Yeah.
And who is collecting, I think, can be a big component of where trust lies.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have, as Leslie was suggesting at the very end, she was saying, if there's funding to collect data, how about we give it to indigenous people? They can use that money to set up their own collection schemes to gather data, have sovereignty over their data on their land. And then when people need to use it, they can go to the community and say, I have a research question, and the community can say, that's something that we want to help you with. Here's some of the data to work with, and we'll coordinate that way. And I think that's another way of building trust is in terms of who has the data, also is going to be who has the power.
Bit like the mining
Yes.
question.
There
always
was very much a theme of
Well,
it's not a cloud, it's a mine.
Is that correct?
Maybe, yeah, I haven't thought about that. But so it is, but yeah, in that respect, that you need to put some energy into it in order to maintain it and to extract data from the mine or the cloud, and so yeah.
The basic argument was like
yeah.
the digital economy is not a cloud but a mine. You know,
Yeah,
and due to
so it turning into it, and because it's not free, definitely not, and storage cost and compute cost definitely. So it's
If I can jump on that
Yes,
just
of
very
course.
quickly. It's interesting because in law school we look at rights and obligations. In my practice, it's very diverse, so I have to think about many different stakeholders applying the same legal issues or different legal issues. When it comes to thinking of that, we always think about value, and that really lies in the eyes of the beholder. And so if we're thinking about what the value is of AI, it's more, I believe, than just the cost, the processing cost. Those are all very important, but it's how can it be useful and to whom, and then how can it be harmful and to whom. And we need to think about all these things while we implement a framework.
Maybe let's move on to Lauren then on not the value issue, but you are applying AI in your day-to-day business. Could you elaborate a bit on what exactly you're doing and how, and maybe how you're tackling a few of those broad questions, including maybe indigenous communities or other local communities, but also like how do you deal with the data issues?
Yeah.
maybe or not.
Yeah, so I'm also a co-lead on a U.S. government group that does, my particular group is data management, and our mission is to promote fair and care data management principles. And I wrote them down so I can remember them. Findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable are data management principles that were introduced several years ago to try and make data available for open research and not have it be stuck in someone's logbook in their, ivory tower somewhere, and actually have it be available for other people to find and use. And somewhat in response to that, a ethics code set came out, and that's called CARE, Collective Benefit, Authority to Control, Responsibility, and Ethics, which sort of plays into some of the stuff we were talking about. So I think there's a lot to that, and I think there's a lot, like we could spend several hours just talking about that, but I think a lot of the concept behind respecting the data, where it comes from, who should own it, what you produce from that is a big deal. I guess as an example, PolArctic was approached by one of the communities up in Canada on the Belcher Islands. This was during COVID, so we're trying to figure out stuff we can do with remote sensing. And that community was like, okay, so we're interested in how do we look at our community and leverage AI, leverage some of our indigenous knowledge, and understand food sovereignty, sustainable, practices. And so we were able to take a lot of remote sensing data, take some of their indigenous knowledge. They had mapped out where they were finding a bunch of species, and we were able to take that, train a model on it, and expand the region and say, hey, have you looked over here? It's sort of far away from your community. And so they were able to take their ship and go and look and say, yes, there is things there that we can actually use. So this actually helps with being able to go and do subsistence harvest.
And do you have any examples, Norwegian examples that
of
of similar modeling or predictions where AI was used, or maybe also like how the Norwegian government different topic deals with this ethics question, as we've heard similar remarks from.
I have a lot of examples of where we apply AI for cases for everything from mapping floods to mapping snow and oil spills and these things that we have been doing at our lab. But I mostly work with remote sensing data, and ethics isn't top. It's not that important because there is no human direct human observations. You don't have no health. If you have health data, we have that at our lab, and then of course we need to store them properly. Cannot very few people have access to them, and they are anonymized, so you don't know which the person they belong to, and all these things. So it needs to be. It's very strict, and you need to apply to have research on them.
I think there was also a point raised that, as anywhere in the world, it's not black and white. You know, we don't we hear artificial intelligence and immediately we think, "Ooh, that could be something dangerous or whatever." But it is exactly what you said.
Yeah.
And
so in Norway, it's quite regulated. I mean, if you want to use health data, it's not easy. It can take months and years to have access to it, and because you need to get approved, and it takes a while. So they need to make sure that it's used properly for the purpose and with limited amount of people.
I also want to follow up on a topic that has been raised by Leslie, but also by Sarah, if I'm correct, on the educational part. You know that you can start later. You don't have to start as a very young one. You know, but nevertheless, programming should become a more essential, or at least one part of the curriculum, high school curriculum, maybe even on. Like, I don't know who wants to take first, but like maybe from your own perspective, your own experience, maybe you have a few.
I mean, I'll just like super quick jump in and say, I think everybody's going to know how to program that's coming up currently. My 12-year-old is learning how to program in Python right now. So,
but because of the curriculum or because of you?
Actually, the curriculum.
The curriculum.
I tried. He wouldn't listen to me.
Do you know how it is in Norway or in Canada? It's like in...
Well, they teach programming to some extent at in high schools, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure in what language. And I think my daughter has some Python, but it wasn't... I don't know if the teacher mastered it properly either. So for myself, I learned it... my father brought a computer in the 80s, and that's how it started. So... It was called BASIC.
BASIC, I remember that one.
Horrible.
Yeah, we tried it though.
Yeah,
but and some were as good.
You learn the principles of how it should, what a program is.
That got lost a bit, no, with the new computer system. I remember at least from the simple steps in Microsoft DOS. You know, you were able to say, okay, I know at least how I can access something. Any idea how it works in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, it may have changed since I've been in high school. It was a while ago, but I took computer programming courses. I was in a specialized STEM program, so it was mandatory for my people, but I do know that they were optional otherwise. I honestly think the sooner we start, the better. Just like with math, it teaches logic in a fundamental way. And so just beyond being able to program something, it's being able to think about problems in a very specific way. So
Lego and coding, then you have a solution.
But that was brought up actually, was that that logical thinking step of well, what question are you trying to answer was one of the things Sarah I think brought up was people would come in and say, I need help. Can you help me with whales? She was like, what do you want with whales?
But I think that's a clear research issue, no? We all face, we need a clear question and a clear kind of methodology on how to approach that. Before we end, I want to come back to the Arctic and what was has been raised in the big in the keynote speak, really the climate adaptation and transformation reference. That we know a lot about mitigation, at least if we look on a broad picture, but we don't really deal with adaptation and transformation. Would you agree? Is that a correct assessment?
I think so. I think maybe due to the funding. I mean, where is the funding, and also this what people know today. Who are working with AI? What do they know? They know data and how to process that. And when you go to the other task, it's not that clear that. So you need all the kind of thinking. Maybe I'm not sure. So it's a totally different scheme.
Well, and I think in climate change, it's really tough because we haven't really experienced something where we're seeing so much change in the environment. So used to be, you could study something and there would be some persistence in that system.
But now
and now we're seeing a lot less persistence in these systems. So I think that makes it a lot harder.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time thinking about climate, and I think AI can be really useful, especially because, as we saw in the presentation, we're able to listen to nature in a different way, to view it in a different way. And this also kind of goes back to trust and asking questions, in a sense that if we're asking questions and training large language models on resource extraction type questions, they're going to be biased towards viewing the Arctic as an ecosystem from which we can use. But if we ask it questions on how to preserve it, then it's a conservation angle. If we ask it questions on how can we change the Arctic so it's useful, because we have a climate crisis across the world, and we will have a lot of climate refugees. We need to be thinking about these questions and training these models in a way that we're not tunnel visioned. And I think it was really valuable to see how we're listening to whales in a new way and understanding it.
I really thought on how to best summarize the session and this recap, but this was really excellent.
Thank you.
I still want to ask, I know it's a difficult question though, but what is the future of AI in the Arctic? You know, like from your work, Arnt, like what are you dealing with right now? Where do you think you will, on which topics will you cover?
For the short term, I think they will be applied to improve predictions of any questions that we ask. And that's, but based on data that they observe to some degree. It could be satellites, could be drones, or could be in situ data, but that's how I see it for the short term. And then for the longer term, it could be, for instance, integrated in more complex digital twins, if that's going to be the thing, maybe. And trying to answer one of the questions that we didn't have any, no one was focused on, addressed by the keynote speaker. So it's.
We do not yet. Lauren, final remarks. What do you think?
I think diversity builds robust solutions. And if we can ask all the questions and collect data in as many ways as we can, and then build as many different kinds of models as we can, we will be able to overcome the climate crisis.
This was a strong message, and here at Arctic Frontiers, we will keep on asking all the questions, and maybe we can develop models to figure out what Arctic Frontiers will be in the future. But let's see. Thank you very much for having joined us again here for the very last Recap TV at Arctic Frontiers 2024. That's it from Tromsø, from that little studio here, and I hope to see you here in Tromsø next year or somewhere in the digital world. Thank you very much.